The House will come to order. Messages from the Senate.
Message from the Senate, Madam Speaker. I hereby announce the adoption by the Senate of the following House concurrent resolution herewith returned. House concurrent resolution number 2, a House concurrent resolution relating to adjournment of the House and Senate until 2026. The message is signed Thomas S. Bodern, Secretary of the Senate. Message from the Senate, Madam Speaker. I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following House file, herewith returned as amended by the Senate, in which amendments the concurrence of the House is respectfully requested. House file number 1290, an act relating to transportation. The message is signed Thomas S. Bodern, Secretary of the Senate. Perryman moves that the House concur in the Senate amendments to House file number 1290 and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Senate.
I recognize the author from Stearns, Representative Perryman, to explain the Senate amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, you might have recalled hearing this House File 286 a couple of weeks ago when Representative Hewitt challenged to people to have a scavenger hunt to find the AEDs that are here in the building. Then that prompted our Sergeant of Arms to send an email the next day to identify where the AEDs are in the buildings. So it just proves that it's an important bill. The concurrence is excellent. There's a few technical changes with the manual on uniform traffic control devices, a clarification that the locations that have AEDs also have their own signs identifying where the AEDs are. Net, it's still, still no cost to the state. And so net, it's still about the who this bill is, not a what, and that is about saving lives here in Minnesota. So you can start your scavenger hunt when you go home looking for those signs, but yes, that is what the concurrence is.
Discussion to the Senate amendment. I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Cagle.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's a good bill, members. I encourage your support. Thank you.
Any further discussion? There being no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion to concur with the Senate amendment say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by the Senate.
Third reading, House file number 1290, as amended by the Senate.
Third reading. Any further discussion?
Do you need these papers or not?
Representative Perryman.
I'll just give them to you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. Every time you see a sign, think of this day and think to look where your AED is in your communities. Thank you.
There being no further
Vote green.
There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 131 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by the Senate and its title is agreed to.
Message from the Senate. Madam Speaker, I hereby announce that the Senate has concurred in and adopted the report of the Conference Committee on Senate File number 1959, an act relating to state government, establishing a budget for the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs. The message is signed Thomas S. Bodern, Secretary of the Senate. The Conference Committee report is addressed to the Honorable Bobby Joe Champion, President of the Senate, the Honorable Lisa M. Dameth, Speaker of the House. We, the undersigned conferees for Senate File Number 1959, report that we've agreed upon the items in dispute and recommend as follows. The report is signed by 4 of the 4 members on the part of the House and 2 of the 3 members on the part of the Senate. Bliss moves that the report of the Conference Committee on Senate File Number 1959 be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Conference Committee.
I recognize the author, the member from Beltrami, Representative Bliss, to explain the report.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, folks, we did it. We got a lot more funding. Fortunately, we were able to fully fund our veterans' homes. We restored the homelessness initiatives. We, thanks to Representative Olson in his drive to increase awareness of veteran suicide, we were able to increase the funding for veteran suicide. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking on this bill tonight. I'm just going to clean up and let the other folks speak on it. Thank you.
Is there any discussion to the Conference Committee report? I recognize the member from Washington, Representative Hemmingson-Yager.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Once again, I just want to stand up to say that how grateful I am that I was able to serve on this committee as well as serve on the Conference Committee. It's always an enlightening process when you get to see how decisions are made, and I really actually appreciated the collaboration. It was nice to collaborate with Chair Bliss, Representative Duran, as well as MDVA and MDMA. I just thought it would be good to kind of go through some of the changes because it was a pretty big change going from $5 million to $50 million. One of the things that was most important to me was the funding for the veterans' homes and the operating adjustments that come along with it. We stood up 3 new veterans' homes in the last biennium, and we want to make sure that those are staffed. And when we fully staff those, then our veterans are really getting the care that they need by people who are able to provide that care. So I was really happy to see that in there. And I will just say, you know, we continue to be uneasy. We know that the VA at the federal level had a bunch of cuts, but what I was relieved to hear with the veterans' homes is that these are state workers, AFSCME, MAPE, MNA, so we have state workers taking care of our vets here in the state, so that gives me a little bit more better feeling that our vets are getting taken care of and we're not gonna have to worry about that funding. And then the last thing I'll say about why these veterans homes funding are so important is that we have the beds, and in order to prevent any sort of federal clawback and making sure we get the federal funding that we need the people in the beds. In order to get the people in the beds, we need to have the staffing. So if these homes don't get to 90% staffing, you can see how the ripple effect impacts everything. So that's what I'll say about that. I'm glad you mentioned the homelessness funding restoration. Also very important, not only to me, but to colleagues that I've been able to talk to as well. We know that with the homelessness funding, it's not just finding a home, but keeping it at functional zero, meaning that the bouts of homelessness are temporary and they're short-lived. But what's also important is that the wraparound services come with this homelessness funding. So again, you'll hear me all the time talk about holistically thinking about things, being comprehensive, and this is one of those places again where we're really thinking holistically, getting these veterans the services that they need. We get the services that they need, the chance for suicide goes down. Along with that, I think it was really important that we listened to the need for suicide prevention specifically as well. So glad to also see some specific called out funding to address specifically suicide, and I look forward to the plan that MDVA is going to come to us with that. The other big thing that was important was food insecurity. Again, we really want to make sure we're taking care of people, and vets especially should not be having to worry about going hungry. So we were able to work with the funding that we had, being really creative and being mindful of kind of what's already going on, the resources that are already present, and how we can allocate that and make sure it's being used effectively and efficiently. So looking at Meals on Wheels and Lutheran Social Services. I think some of my colleagues will speak to some other things as well, but and I will just kind of briefly talk about, you know, it's really important, you heard me talk about the recognition for our Special Guerrilla Unit veterans, long overdue, so glad that that stayed. Disappointed still in the Claim Sharks bill, but I'm committed to continue working with bill authors and continue working with people to bring that forward and bring it stronger for the next session. And I think with that, I will let some of my other colleagues speak. Thank you for your time.
Any further discussion to the conference committee report? I recognize the member from Washington, Representative Cha.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was in the conference committee as a bystander, and I just want to thank the members of the committees. I particularly want to thank Co-Chair Bliss for his comments made in committee in regards to the amendments that were put into the provisions of the SGU, which he defended gracefully. So I want to thank Chair Co-Bliss for that. I want to thank Chair Zhang. Chair Zhang, thank you for your leadership in ensuring that SGUs were included in your Veterans Bill. As a son of a SGU to another, I want to thank you as my colleague and to the members of the committee. Thank you to Emerson Yeager and the co-chairs. I'm honored that you have honored the veterans in the Hmong community. And each and every day that they're down here, I just want to share with you that it's not easy. It's not easy to gather 20 to 30 Hmong veterans to the state capitol as needed, because it is very, very hard for those families to be here. For every SGU that comes here, there's 1,000 that could not be down to the Capitol. Every time this SGU bill comes into a hearing, it's almost traumatizing for them to be here, to remind them that they have not been recognized. And so I really appreciate the efforts that this body in the House of Representatives that has come together to acknowledge and to honor them for the 50th year that they've been here. And I know that they're watching this session more than any other session, and that they are in all our districts, whether you're in greater Minnesota or whether you're in the Metro City. Down in Cannon Falls, there's a park called Hmong Veterans Memorial Park. That park is owned by a constituent in Engen's district, and he knows my uncle very well. And what he did was he purchased a T-28, a Navy T-28 fighter airplane from, I believe it was North Carolina, for a great amount of money, and he flew it here to St. Paul. It landed down here in the St. Paul airport, and then it was transported to Cannon Falls. I think that is Altendorf's district. Yes. And so she knows where the park is, and she's probably seen the airplane. But it's a flying T-28 airplane in Cannon Falls. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what this SGU bill means for our community. To have a T-28 to remind the community how important this war is to the children of these SGUs. Every Hmong person in the state of Minnesota is a direct descendant of that family, of the SGUs. I'll talk a little bit about my father. My father was lucky enough to make it to the United States of America. In 1975, after the war, we went into the refugee camps in 76 to 1980. I came to the United States in 1981. And what I remember about my father is all he wanted was recognition. In 2011, he passed at the age of 80. But he talked about the Plain of Jars. He talked about the battle on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. He talked about surviving. And he talked about the American dream and what was promised. And I think he and a lot of the elders would be very proud to be here to know that in this House of Representatives, that we as a body together, all 134 of us, are recognizing their spirit, the family, and the children of all these families. It's so important to all the young Americans in the state of Minnesota because they know the sacrifice that was made to ensure that there was opportunities. I often talked in my cultural language, native language, about this photograph that my parents have of me in the refugee camp. 1977, there's a photo of me with my parents in the refugee camp. And I didn't have any pants on. It's on my website, but I photoshopped the pants onto it. So if you want to know, go to my website and you'll see this refugee photo with these Photoshop pants on. But I bring this up because one day I went to my parents, I said, Mom and Dad, how come you didn't put pants on me and you took a picture of me and you can see everything? I was really upset. But my mom and my dad started to cry. And they said to me, son, we're sorry. But because we have left our homeland and we could not take anything with us, that we only brought you. And we didn't bring the silver, we didn't bring the clothes, we didn't bring the money. We brought just you. That's all we could grab. And the reason why you don't have a pair of pants and a pair of shoes is because we were so poor in the refugee camps that there was no materials, there was no shoes to be sold. And that is why you don't have a pair of pants. And so that you must forgive us. Well, that really humbled me. But that's not just my story. It's the story of every Hmong American who is here in the state of Minnesota. That thanks to the legislative body in the 70s, that Minnesota decided to house the resettlement of many Hmong Americans. And there's no denying the opportunity in the state of Minnesota that today there are 9 Hmong legislators at the state capitol, 3 senators and 6 House members. Minnesota is the greatest state for Hmong Americans. It is because of people like you in this legislative body that has allowed opportunities for refugees like myself to be in my generation, to become a lawmaker, to sit next to each and every one of you to enact laws for the state of Minnesota. That is the opportunity that's given in the state of Minnesota. That's what makes Minnesota such a great state for somebody like myself, who came here with a family that did not speak English. A thing about speaking English, that it took me many, many years to understand English. You have to understand there was no EL programs in the 70s and the 80s. That when I went to my first EL class, they didn't know how to interact with us. And so they went and bought farm animals and toys from the store, and they came to class and they said, you know what, this is a pig. Here's a horse. This is a car. And that's how I learned English in the 80s. It wasn't until I was in 5th grade that I really caught on. But from my time as a kindergartner to 5th grade, I was the main translator for my community. Every time I went to the dentist, I went to the doctors, I was translating for my parents and for my neighbor. And everywhere they went, they took these little children with them to translate for services, whether it was with the, getting Medi-Cal, Medicaid, going to the dentist, or even doing a job application. And that brings me to think about my mom, who used to take public transportation to go peel potatoes in, Minneapolis. We talk about public transportation. We often talk about the men, but we don't talk about the women from the SGU. Those that became nurses, those that became widows, those that, foster these refugee kids without fathers. So many men died in that war. Over 50,000 young men died, that the CIA started to recruit 15-year-olds and 12-year-olds. That is a fact. As you saw the SUs up there, those were the 12 and 15-year-old men. I often think about Mr. Yi Shang, who flew over 1,200 sorties as a robin in the backseat of an airplane next to the Raven pilot. 1,200 sorties, can you think about that? Those of you that know about the Air Force, that any pilot that flies over 100 sorties is a Top Gun. There are men like that in my community that are still with us. There are men like that that never made it to see the American dream. I am the product of that American dream. I am the product of that sacrifice, along with my colleagues who are refugees. And I can't thank the United States of America enough for the democracy, the freedom that has afforded me such a life in the state of Minnesota. And so I would like to thank those legislators that made it possible to resettle Hmong refugees in the state of Minnesota. And as my father served the CIA from 61 to 75, as your colleague, this is my service to the state of Minnesota. Thank you, Speaker.
I recognize the member from Washington, Representative Hill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I wanted to rise to share a few thoughts about the Veterans Committee and the work and the bill that is going to be before us here as we move forward. I want to thank Chair Bliss and Chair Zhang for running a committee that was not just welcoming, but came to feel like family, like no other committee experience I've had to date. So thank you for your incredible leadership. I want to outline a couple of things. I've never been particularly close to the veterans community. I have many family members who served, but I haven't run in those circles. And Chair Bliss taught us a valuable lesson when he passed out what are called challenge coins to members of the committee. And this was my ticket in, Chair Bliss, to connect with veterans in my community in a new way. And so I want to thank you for continuing this tradition and for including non-veterans on the committee to take part in it, as it has been a great way to connect and build bridges with folks that I hadn't had a chance to connect with in the past. So thank you for that. I have to admit, I'm not very good at it. I've given my challenge coins away and I haven't necessarily collected every time. So I'll continue to work on that. So thank you. I want to outline one of the organizations that is in the bill for an appropriation, Hometown Hero Outdoors. And it's an organization that works to serve veterans. They also serve first responders and all of their families. And they seek to provide opportunities to get veterans and first responders and their families outside for therapeutic activity. And, you know, once I have a connection to a retired police officer, and after a tragic suicide of a police officer in our region, he shared with me the worst place that someone who has post-traumatic stress disorder can be is at home, alone on their couch, day after day. And what Chris Tetro has accomplished in setting up this organization and expanding it is to reach out to these folks who may be isolated and connect them with folks who also served or who are also in those first responder roles and get them outside to go canoeing, to go hunting, to go ATVing, et cetera, snowmobiling. And it has had an amazing impact on the lives and the families that he has served. And so I'm thankful for that appropriation for a first-rate organization. I also want to highlight what Representative Chaw talked about, the Special Guerrillas Unit bill and including them and giving them the recognition that they deserve 50 years after the end of that conflict. And the stories we heard in committee and that I've heard since, taking part in a few events to celebrate that recognition being given, have changed my perspective on that war from what I was taught out of textbooks when I was in school and what I've learned of it since then, and has allowed me a new perspective of the heroic work that they engaged in all those years ago. And I'm so proud that recognition has been provided to that brave group of men and their families. And so in closing, I just want to thank the members of the committee. I'm proud of this work, and I look forward to an opportunity to continue it as we move forward. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Hicks.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. I am not on the Veterans Committee, but I rise today because many of our veterans are people with disabilities. Many of our veterans are people with invisible disabilities. You wouldn't know what they are dealing with unless you asked. And this bill, as it has come back, really addresses one of the consequences of those disabilities, and that's housing insecurity. People with disabilities, particularly those with invisible disabilities like PTSD, are more likely to struggle to obtain and maintain secure housing. So I just want to rise today to thank the Veterans Committee for prioritizing housing for our vets. We talk about people with disabilities all the time, and we sometimes forget that people with disabilities exist in all other subsets of people, including our veterans. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Chair Zhang, for your hard work on this bill. You included a lot of great provisions that will benefit veterans for years to come. This is particularly important in light of the haphazard funding cuts coming from the federal government. This bill's provisions addressing homelessness are particularly important, as is the food delivery and suicide prevention provisions. It's particularly important to provide state recognition of veterans of the secret war in Laos. There is one unfortunate provision in this bill I want to mention. The bill eliminates funding for the Veterans Resilience Project. The Veterans Resilience Project serves all veterans, providing trauma-informed care that respects the experiences of all veterans. Veterans have testified how effective their form of therapy has been in helping them in their recovery journey, and has been covered by the media. Removing this funding is a short-sighted step in an otherwise solid and helpful bill. I know you fought the removal of this provision, Chair Zhang, and I appreciate your work on the bill. So thank you, members. I just wanted to highlight one provision in this bill.
I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Lee Kay.
Thank you, Speaker. Like my colleagues, I want to commend the conference committee members for bringing us back a bill that funds the program to address veterans homelessness. For some of you who don't know, I spent nearly a decade in Congress as an appropriations staffer, and my subcommittee was the Military Construction and Veterans Affairs Subcommittee. And so this issue is very near and dear to me. My boss was also the person who continued to push back the sunset of the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness. This is a level of government that is supposed to cut through the red tape to make sure that all of our different agencies and departments are working together. And so because of this, veterans homelessness was cut in half in the last 10 years. So it was a really good accomplishment. But the point I want to make is, just because it's working doesn't mean that we don't need to fund that anymore. And so I'm really glad that the report came back to us and said that we value this. We want to make sure that our veterans have a home over their head. In case you also don't know, 10% of the U.S. population, the adult population, is veterans, but they are overrepresented in our homelessness population. And so I just want to make sure that folks understand the context, that this is really important, because, like my colleagues alluded to a month ago, DOJ let go all of the staff at the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness. And so, at a time when there is uncertainty at the federal level on how we address this issue in a systematic way, I'm really glad that we could get a conference committee report that actually seeks to continue to address this problem so that it does not go on the rise. Because in case you don't know, in the state of Minnesota, one of the saddest demographics in the homelessness space is that senior homelessness is on the rise, right? So this is people who, are on fixed income, who have probably, paid off their homes, but are at risk of losing them because of the increase in property taxes. And so I just want to share that point. And I'd also be remiss to not mention that this week is 50 years since the Hmong General Vang Pao left Laos. And so that's why a couple of days ago we had SGU Day, or we have Hmong American Day. And so just want to make sure that folks understand that context. The fact that we passed this bill with this recognition is is incredibly important, and want folks to understand that May 14th is a dark day, very similar to April 30th for our Vietnamese American community. And so, as we remember this, I also want folks to think about all of the things that our SUU veterans and our Hmong community have contributed and given to the state of Minnesota in the last 50 years. And so with that, I'm very happy to vote yes on this conference committee report, and again, just thank the conferees for all of their work.
I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Feist.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to mention a little thing. It was really an honor to be on the Veterans Committee. Thank you, Chair Bliss. Thank you, Chair Zhang. I was really gratified to see that the funding was included for the Technical Assistance Coordinator for the Veterans County Service Officers, the CVSOs, to focus on 3 groups of veterans that need some extra specialized interventions. Those are women veterans, who are the fastest growing category of veterans, as well as specifically technical assistance to address veteran suicide, which, as we've talked about a lot in committee and in this body, is a really pervasive issue that we have a moral obligation to address. And lastly, to intervene for system-involved veterans. These veterans are uniquely complex. Oftentimes, the reason that they are justice involved is because of a traumatic brain injury, substance use disorders related to trauma, mental health conditions, traumatic brain injury, I think I might have said, and chronic pain. And so just really very excited, just a very small amount of money that's going to go a long way. And I did also just want to express some disappointment. That the Claim Sharks bill was not included in this final bill. So I know that there's a commitment on both sides of the aisle to work on this, and I believe that there is a way that we can address the fraud, but also ensure that veterans can have access to the services that they need to receive the benefits that they have earned. So looking forward to continuing to work on this in the coming session. Thank you so much, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Bonner.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think the Veterans Bill, I'm delighted to see that it came back with funding for our homeless veterans, and to really understand how we take care of those who served our country with honor and dignity. I'm grateful to them for their service, and I'm grateful that we were able to restore that funding to take care of them, and particularly to take care of our veterans in the veterans' homes. But the one thing that I did want to mention briefly before we get to this bill is there's one thing clearly absent from this bill, and that was the Claim Sharks provision. This is a tale of big money lobbying to try and keep something out of a bill. It was mentioned on this floor yesterday, the word charlatan. And that is precisely what these claim sharks are. They are charlatans. They are unscrupulous organizations. And it's been presented on this floor that it meant a lack of choice for veterans who needed assistance. However, there are over 50 Minnesota-based lawyers that are accredited by the VA as required by federal law. There are over 300 agents and representatives in the state of Minnesota that are accredited that can provide that choice if necessary. And we have a legion of dedicated veteran service officers that work tirelessly day in and day out to help our veterans get the benefits they need. It is unconscionable to have claim sharks who come in, do almost nothing to help these individuals. In one case I mentioned to you before, Henry, an 89-year-old man approached at an assisted living facility while his wife was in memory care. They were happy to cash a check for thousands of dollars worth of his hard-earned benefits for not filing one piece of paper. Not one. That is disgusting. It's something we should have had in this bill. It should have passed. And I don't want to see anybody with their heads down pretending that we did not do what we did. We did not take care of our veterans here. We cannot continue to allow this. So I just wanted to say that I think that come next year, this should be a top priority to get done. It is time that we take care of our veterans and make sure that unscrupulous individuals cannot take away their hard-earned and won benefits. Thank you.
I recognize a member from St. Louis, Representative Scrava.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Although this bill is not perfect, I'm still going to support it. I had a couple of issues in this bill that didn't make it through for Veterans on the Lake in Ely, Minnesota at Fall Lake. And it's disappointing because the folks that do come up to Veterans on the Lake are a lot of PTSD, and I think Representative Fredericks was talking about, Representative Hill, sorry, talking about going outdoors, snowmobiling, fishing, doing that. And that's what they do. They come up north and their mind gets away from what they did, and it gives them an opportunity. And we had some money in there for scholarships for the people that couldn't afford it. A lot of them just can't afford to come up, drive up. So we put some money aside, and then we help offset their costs when they get there. It's a volunteer-run organization. They do a great job on Veterans on the Lake. And I wish we could have helped them this time, but we didn't. And we'll keep trying. But other than that, it's a pretty good bill, and I hope everyone supports it. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Clardy.
First of all, I wanted to thank the chairs for an outstanding job for a really good bill. I stand here as a daughter of a veteran, a granddaughter of a veteran, a sister of a veteran, so you get the drift there. I'm proud of what happened here. My background, even though I'm a teacher, I have a degree in psychology, so I'm really interested in making sure that the mental health aspect is there. So everything is all tied together, whether it's the homelessness piece or the, basically getting food for the veterans. And I have a provision within the bill that provides food security for some of the people in greater Minnesota, because why should our veterans have to fight for that after fighting for us so long? A couple things that I want to make as a priority next year is just continuing to work on that suicide piece, which is very crucial. And then also, I'm very proud of the work that was done with the SGU. I also would like to expand that to incorporating more activity with some of our Black veterans. I understand that the military doesn't see race within, but I also recognize with a lot of the pictures that are done with a lot of the organization that there's kind of a void with Black veterans or even females of a certain age, being involved in some auxiliary groups. So some of the things that I hope that would be included in the future are the areas of mental health, the piece with the Black veterans, and I'm specifically saying that, and then also incorporating more outreach toward females that are veterans. So overall, I think the bill is amazing. I know that one of Chair Bliss's goals was that it was a nonpartisan committee, and I think for the most part that we were able to do that. So thanks for the hard work, and I'll be supporting the bill.
Is there any further discussion to the conference committee report? I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Zhang.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First, I just want to thank our incredible staff and our conferees, and thank you, Co-Chair Bliss, for your leadership. This bill is about justice, it's about dignity, and it's about doing the right thing by those who have already given so much. And so I respectfully ask for your support. Let's stand up for all of our veterans and make sure no one is left behind. Thank you.
Representative Bliss.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And just in closing, I do want to thank all the committee members. It's been an honor serving with you. I do want to just again say that the big part of the bill that chewed up a lot of our money was the veterans' homes. It was a commitment we've made in previous legislatures, we need to fund our veterans' homes to get them up and running so we can receive the per diem back from the federal government to start funding these and standing them up on their own. I did want to mention the suicide prevention again. We all know some veterans, I'm sure, that have committed suicide. I personally have lost a family member 2 years ago on January 1st, so that it hit home for me. We're actually losing ground in that fight. We need to focus on it more. I'm really happy to see the MDVA is going to come back with a comprehensive plan on how they plan on addressing this and improving it. And I did want to mention on the SGU vets, thank you to Rep. Shaw and Rep. Zhang on this area. I do hope to expand this in the future. We do need to recognize other groups of people that have helped our veterans in foreign theaters, and this is the first step in that direction. So, members, I would appreciate a green vote. Thank you.
There being no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion to adopt the conference committee report, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by the conference.
Third reading, Senate File number 1959, as amended by conference.
Third reading as amended by conference. Further discussion to the conference committee report. I recognize a member from Beltrami, Representative Duran.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I would like to first thank everybody on the Veterans Committee for this great opportunity to serve our community. Obviously it's my first term, and it is an honor to be able to serve on the Veterans Committee. And it's really something that I'm taking to heart a lot, and I really appreciate the leadership for putting me on the conference committee as well. It was a big honor for me to be able to go and serve a little bit farther down this process. One of the things I want to talk about here, and I'll give you guys a little story. I know you guys love hearing people talk. But one of the things that I want to mention, and then I'll get into the bigger topics here, is that when I deployed to Singapore, Afghanistan in 2010, we weren't really sure what we were going to go up against. It ended up being a very tough deployment where 25 of my brothers ended up giving the ultimate sacrifice. 300 were wounded. So, and if you don't know, we deployed with somewhere around 900 Marines. So that was a third of our unit that got injured or ended up dying. So when, a lot of my brothers and sisters came home, there was a lot that were struggling. And there was a lot that were battling every day to try to continue moving on, and we lost a few. So, going through this and giving more money to veteran suicide is huge. It is a great way for us to continue giving back to our brothers and sisters who served, and especially in combat. But what I'm hearing about the claim shark stuff and some of the sacrifices that I know that, that I've given, but then others have given as well. And for those that think that we on the Republican side are not listening and not supporting our veterans where they should be, well, that's dang right just a lie. And the claim shark issue I take to heart because those are my brothers and sisters that do deserve those claims, that do deserve those rights. So I take it very serious when people start talking about the claim shark stuff and that we don't really care or we haven't taken care of our veterans the way we should have. Well, maybe if there was an initial different path going down that road, we probably could have came up with a good deal. But we weren't able to get that. So we will continue to work on that, and I'm happy to work with anybody inside this room to make sure that we're protecting our veterans. There's no one inside this room that I believe that won't want to support our veterans, but I can tell you this right now, I probably have more passion about protecting our veterans than anybody inside this room, because I fought next to those guys and gals. I was there with them. And then when I got back, I listened to them suffer. I saw them suffering. So when people are in here saying that we're not taking care of our veterans, I take it personal. Because those are my brothers and sisters. Those are the people who served next to me, and now we're saying that we're not taking care of them. That's a huge issue for me. I'm willing to sit here and work with anybody to try to protect them. But I will not stand by and listen to saying that we're not doing what we can to protect them. We got to be doing this the right way. We got to make sure we're protecting all veterans. So I really appreciate being on the committee. I 100% am behind anybody who wants to help out veterans. I will be right there with you at any time. But please, look at the bigger picture. Try to listen to the people who actually served, who were there. So, I'm going to end with this. I appreciate everybody. I'm willing to work with anybody. I love my veterans, and I love those who support those. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Any further discussion? I recognize the member from Waseca, Representative Sexton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Great words. Representative Duran, I'd like to second those. I will tell you that I started my military career back in 1981. Fall semester, it was trimesters back then at the University of Minnesota in the ROTC program. And at that time, it wasn't that long after Vietnam. There was still a lot of heartache. People would walk by us on campus, spit on our uniforms, make us look like we weren't really caring about our nation. It made me really doubt whether or not I wanted to come back to this state, which I love. When I finished my 26-plus year career in the Air Force and had seen a lot of things. But I am glad to be back here. I am glad for the things that are in this bill, and I am glad that we're doing more and more every day. And much like Representative Duran said, we just want to make sure we do it right, we don't do it fast, and we knock out too many things trying to save one person. We've been in those situations, we've been in combat. Things never go quite right, and they can go quite wrong very, very quickly. So we, with that experience, want to prevent that as we absolutely support our veterans. I heard many words today about people who haven't really identified with their veterans community. And I just want to remind you, because I'm a member of both the VFW and the American Legion, and I'm on the Honor Guard, and I'm missing Honor Guard ceremonies right now to be here with you for our fallen veterans. And I'm very proud to do that. But you have the opportunity to go to a pancake breakfast, a fish fry. You can look up anywhere and go to those things and see veterans and people supporting veterans, serving the food, helping veterans, and being very happy about doing that. And I really encourage you to make it more than just the words. We'll be coming out of session hopefully very soon. We've got a summer. Sometimes those activities back off, just like people going on vacation, but then they really ramp up in the fall. So go meet a veteran. Go spend some time with a veteran. It's really not that hard. And then you'll see why, some of the places are a little bit run down because most of those folks are retired, like myself, and we can't afford to put the money that we originally did back in our 30s and 40s into those facilities. So some of the things you haven't seen, but we still have the opportunity to do, is help the veterans by raising the actual amount that their houses are assessed for so that they can afford to stay in their houses. That's still coming up. And we don't need to tax with property taxes these small facilities in our communities. We're not missing that much income. We need to pass that as well. That's pretty darn easy. So I'd like you to think about that as we go forward with the vote. Thank you very much, Chair Bliss, John Hallquist. You all made me feel part of the committee, or the conference committee as well, even though I actually am not on the committee, but was able to participate from afar. So thank you very much, and let's go green on this.
Further discussion? I recognize the author, Representative Bliss.
Vote green. Thank you.
No further discussion. The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 130 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by conference and the title is agreed to.
Message from the Senate, Madam Speaker. I hereby announce that the Senate has concurred and adopted the report of the Conference Committee on Senate File Number 23-7, an act relating to cannabis. The message is signed Thomas S. Bodern, Secretary of the Senate. The report is addressed to the Honorable Bobby Joe Champion, President of the Senate, the Honorable Lisa M. Damuth, Speaker of the House. We, the undersigned conferees for Senate File Number 2370, report that we've agreed upon the items in dispute and recommend as follows. The report is signed by 4 of the 4 members on the part of the House and 2 of the 3 members on the part of the Senate. Stephenson moves that the report of the Conference Committee on Senate File Number 2370 be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Conference Committee.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Stephenson, to explain the report.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, we had a really productive conference committee, and especially want to thank Representative West for his collaboration and work on this. We did prevail on most of the House provisions, and we did make a few additional changes, including directing the Office of Cannabis Management to come back to this body with a streamlining proposal in the medical space. That was very important to Representative West, and I'm glad we were able to get that done. We also did do something to make sure that we have more testing capacity, which will be important as the market launches later this year, and a few other changes, including an expungement provision. But I think we had a very collaborative, good conference committee with a good result, and I urge members to support adoption of the report.
Is there any discussion to the conference committee report? I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would urge members to support this conference report adoption. The bill got marginally better, and it brings us one step closer to having a safe, tested, and legal market in Minnesota.
Any further discussion? There being no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion to adopt the conference committee report, say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by conference.
Senate File Number 2370, third reading as amended by conference.
Third reading is amended by conference. Any further discussion? I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, May 30th, 2023, Minnesota legalized adult use cannabis. November 7th, 2023, Ohio legalized adult use cannabis. Ohio now has nearly a $500 million market. Meanwhile, Minnesota, with our 6-month head start, has, let me see here, not a single licensed store. We could do a lot better. Thankfully, this bill does help. We have a hopelessly convoluted regulatory system based on this fantasy that you can create a craft cannabis market based on government regulation. It's like trying to run Amazon out of an Etsy store, with 3 inspectors checking the doilies for antitrust violations. We're inching closer to a legal, safe, and tested market thanks to this bill, so I'd urge support. And while it could be better, many of these businesses are set up to fail because of this regulatory system, just like we saw with the medical cannabis market, and the 2 original operators had to be sold because the market was so heavily regulated. And now, before a single license is issued, the tax rate's going to go up 50% because Governor Walz wouldn't sign a budget without tax increases. So this bill moves us closer to a legal, safe, and tested market. It helps hemp businesses continue to compete, as they have been for several years in our state, by exporting their products, their federally legal products, to other states, even if Minnesota's excessive regulation make them not allowed here. It helps the medical cannabis businesses continue to provide needed medicine to medical patients by relieving a little bit of the regulatory burden. And as Chair Stephenson mentioned, we will work to unify the supply chain, which, if I explain that to you right now, you'd just be mystified of how this came to be. And there's a lot of support around that, and I'm very appreciative of it. And lastly, for these people who want to get involved in this new market, we're moving one step closer so they can finally pursue their dream. And honestly, it is the American dream to start a business and provide for your family. And that's what a lot of people have been waiting to do. President Trump voiced support for cannabis legalization on the ballot measure in Florida. He's even talked about rescheduling cannabis federally, which would be a needed reform and would help immensely every business access needed tax deductions and investments that they could get if it wasn't a federally illegal substance. And consequently, after he voiced that support, his share in the last election of the youth vote did go up 10 points. So for those who need that to convince them, I would highly encourage you to investigate that. States like Missouri, Montana, and Ohio have demonstrated that, hey, Republicans can do this right. And I am happy to work across the aisle, work as we can to make a functional market that can both provide the needed increased public safety around the product, around the businesses, and also, to the Democrats' point, relieve some of the, what we'd call an unjust punishment over a meaningless offense. So, members, this bill makes a needed step in the right direction to get us to a safe and legal market. It helps our hemp businesses who deal in a federally legal product. and it helps our medical combination businesses maintain their existence, really, because what we've seen is Minnesota's regulatory structures make it hard to grow and thrive. So members, I'd encourage a green vote on this bill.
I recognize a member from Anoka, Representative Stephenson.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you again, Representative West, for your work on this. You know, there's a lot of provisions in this bill that I think are important and significant and will help move our nascent cannabis marketplace forward in Minnesota. You know, one of the more significant ones relates to a provision allowing for the licensing of wholesalers for low-potency hemp beverages. And I want members to know that these low-potency hemp beverages are a real Minnesota creation and something that is a nation-leading thing that has been really productive for our local breweries in particular. I'm not sure if members realize that alcohol sales generally and beer sales in particular are on the decline, and I, for one, blame the young people. It's the young people who are apparently not drinking beer. It's a problem. But a lot of our little craft breweries across Minnesota are struggling right now due to declining sales in the beer space. And many of them have found significant economic gain by taking up these low-dose hemp THC products, which, as I said, really started here in Minnesota. You know, when we passed in 2022 a provision clarifying the legality of low-dose hemp derived products. A lot of those breweries really took the initiative and built this industry that has really spread across the country. In fact, our model for regulating these products, which we passed in 2023, has become a model that's used around the country. And it's kept a lot of breweries in Minnesota that otherwise would have gone out of business in business, which of course is good for small businesses all across the state. There are local breweries in my district in Coon Rapids and Anoka that are just, you know, important parts of our community, and we want to keep them around. They're employers, they are good meeting places, they're just very valuable elements of our community. But it's also important, those are, you know, for folks who have been involved in liquor law in the past, you know, there's different aspects of the industry, right? There's the retail part of the industry, and there's the production part, but in between there's this wholesaler segment. How do you get your product from manufacturing to, you know, an actual retail marketplace? We need a healthy wholesaling industry in Minnesota. That's a very important thing to keep this industry moving forward. And unfortunately, with cannabis still being illegal on a federal level, any business that has interaction with a cannabis license could potentially have unfavorable tax consequences at the federal level. So we have to have a whole separate lane of licensure for these low-dose products. And one thing that was missing going into this year was a element for the wholesalers. So we added that, and that has the added benefit of deriving some licensing revenue, which has modestly helped in the commerce target space. So Chairs Herr and O'Driscoll can thank this bill for making their target a little easier to reach. There still is a lot of work to be done in the medical space. We want to make sure that every patient who relies upon that system in order to get the medicine they need is able to do so. You know, you may think, for example, why is this so important if we're going to have adult use, if we're going to have a legal cannabis marketplace? Why is it important to preserve a medical marketplace? But it's important to understand that some people who rely on cannabis as medicine are not able to purchase adult use cannabis because they are not adults. Kids who have serious seizure disorders rely on cannabis to treat their condition, and we need to make sure we have a productive medical cannabis marketplace in order to ensure that those kids are still able to get their medicine. So we made some steps on this year, further enhancing the medical program, but there's certainly more work to be done, as Representative West noted, trying to get that streamlining to make sure it's economically viable. That's something that's very important. I also do want to take a moment and just comment that on another thing that is still yet to be done, which is to make sure we're all on the same page about what kind of local control is necessary, because that's at the stage in the market launch where we are now. OCM has issued preliminary approval to many licensees who are out talking to your cities and counties, trying to get the last registration that's necessary in order to actually open their business. And I think we're seeing some different results in different places. And, you know, someone who's worked very hard on this is Representative Hansen. So, Madam Speaker, would Representative Hansen yield to a question?
Representative Hansen will yield to a question. Representative Stephenson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Hansen, if you could comment on the current state of play among local control and what you think needs to happen going forward.
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair Stephenson. I'm happy to go ahead and talk a little bit about this. I did talk in the conference committee yesterday, so I'd invite folks to go ahead and watch that and catch up on the full speech. I won't repeat that here, but it's important to understand that a critical aspect of our legalization structure is a partnership with our local governments. We passed this law knowing that we respected local control and placed just 2 responsibilities on our locals. So it's important that we support them in that. I tried to get some language across the finish line that was bipartisan, and our conference committee was ready to support that, but unfortunately that wasn't something we could get done without the supports of the league and the association. So we want to encourage folks to talk to your locals, make sure that they understand what those 2 responsibilities are, because that is going to be critical. Any delays that happen in the industry beyond what Democrats and more across the aisle have quoted in the paper and across on media as being a launch in early 2025 will unfortunately fall on the shoulders of our locals, and we don't want that. So I think that's important for everyone here to know, and thank you, Chair Stephenson.
Representative Stephenson.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Hansen. I appreciate that information. I appreciate all the work on this committee. We had also some great staff support. Thank you in particular to the amazing Jack Dockendorf. Of course, Ben Johnson is just a treasure to this institution, and Faith Prevette, my LA, would also work very hard. And with that, I'd ask members for a yes vote.
There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 80 ayes and 50 nays, the bill is passed as amended by conference, and its title is agreed to. Motions and resolutions. There are copies of the non-controversial motions and resolutions on your online and on your desk. Hearing no objections, the motions prevail. Messages from the Senate.
A message from the Senate, Madam Speaker. I hereby announce the Senate refuses to concur in the House amendments to the following Senate file. Senate file number 1740, an act relating to education policy. The Senate respectfully requests that a conference committee be appointed. The Senate has appointed to such committee Senators Swazinski, Kunish, McQuaid, Gustafson, and Coleman. The message is signed Thomas S. Bodern, Secretary of the Senate. Jordan moves that the House accede to the request of the Senate and that the Speaker appoint a conference committee of 4 members of the House to meet with a like committee appointed by the Senate on the disagreeing votes of the 2 houses on Senate file number 1740.
I recognize the author from Hennepin, Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Speaker Damath. Members, we put a good bill together, but sounds like we have some more discussion to do, so that is my motion. And then we can go on and talk a little bit more about education policy.
Any all those in favor, aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails. Announcement by the Speaker.
Announcement by the Speaker. The Speaker announces the appointment of the following members of the House to a conference committee on Senate file number 1740. Jordan, Hill, Bennett, and Lawrence.
Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move a recess to the call of the Speaker.
Representative Niska moves a recess to the call of the Speaker. All those in favor, aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails. The House stands in recess.